Tonight, as the Democrats were cheering, the first and only major confrontation of the convention was taking place on the streets of San Francisco. More than 200 demonstrators, most of them leaving a punk rock concert, were arrested tonight as they marched to San Francisco's Hall of Justice. They were taunting the police in the streets. John Fowler is standing by with the details of that story. John?
Thank you, Barbara. It was wild on the streets for a couple of hours tonight. Demonstrators who were angry over the arrests of 87 other protesters earlier today staged an impromptu rally to City Hall, but top security officials say that they were ready. They anticipated something like this. They say history shows them that most violence occurs on the last day of conventions. Just about the time that Walter Mondale was speaking tonight, about 2,000, mostly punk rockers, marched from Moscone Center to the Hall of Justice in San Francisco. Some of them sat down on Bryant Street between 6th and 7th, blocking traffic.
If you fail to disperse, you shall be arrested.
No KKK, no fascist USA. No war. No KKK, no fascist USA. No war.
An army of riot police, armed with nightsticks, some on horseback, began to clear the streets only 4 blocks from the convention center, but this was not strictly a political protest. Why don't you just leave?
Well, my friends are still in there, and they won't let my friends go.
Ironically, officials say almost all of those arrested earlier today had already been released. Police began arresting these demonstrators with little resistance. Down the street, the rest of the crowd continued taunting police and blocking traffic. Police on motorcycles charged those who refused to move. After more than an hour of this, arrests were still being made. Well over 200 people had been taken into custody. With little room in City Hall jails, officials say they expect nearly all of these people to be cited and released. Police tonight say that most of those arrested were charged with misdemeanor counts, but there were also 9 felony arrests for assault on police officer and for inciting to riot. Some protesters were slightly injured, but no police officers were reported hurt. All in all, they seemed to act with restraint, and the situation really never did get out of hand. Reporting live in San Francisco, I'm John Fowler, KTVU, Channel 2 News.
You should have voiced, listen, Van Alst was there.
March to the Hall of Justice! March to the Hall of Justice!
Friends of the people arrested earlier today going to the building with the police and the jail inside.
I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to do something about poverty. I'm going to do something about war.
But the group's immediate demand was for the demonstrators still behind bars.
Let them go! Let them go! Let them go!
That was not one of the options.
If you fail to disperse, you shall be arrested.
Some went to stand a half a block away, while those who stayed were surrounded, arrested, and booked. Then the onlookers staged a die-in in the street. Again, police moved in. Block by block, the police managed to move the demonstrators further and further away from the Hall of Justice. But everywhere they went, there were scattered pockets of resistance. Those who could be singled out were arrested, while the officers kept advancing, even at our cameraman. By dusk, the streets had been cleared, and those who wanted to were joining their friends in jail. Wilson Van Alst, News Center 4, Crime Specialist.
Smaller scale. Her name heard bands like the Dead Kennedys. Some slam dancers jumped into the crowd. Not long after the concert, about 300 demonstrators marched to the Hall of Justice. They said they would, and they sat down in the street, and police moved in on them after warning them to disperse again and again. When it was all over, 282 people were arrested, some charged with misdemeanors, 9 others for felony assault on police officers and inciting a riot. It had been a mostly quiet week of protests until it was forced tonight.
Demonstration outside the Hall of Justice gets out of hand, putting dozens of people behind bars. Shoving match through the streets of San Francisco tonight. It involved police and hundreds of demonstrators. At last count, almost 300 protesters had been arrested. Dave Bryant says the trouble started with a protest concert outside Moscone Center.
While the Democrats listened to Ferraro and Mondale inside, about 3,000 demonstrators held what they called a rock against Reagan outside. About 500 protesters broke away from the concert and marched through the streets of San Francisco to the Hall of Justice. Protesting, they said, President Reagan's warlike nuclear arms policies and the Ku Klux Klan. Chanting, the demonstrators took over Bryant Street in front of the Hall of Justice, then decided to sit down.
I command you in the name of the people of the state of California to immediately disperse.
Police gave the order to disperse and reinforced the order for those who chose to ignore it. Eventually moving in horseback units. Sheriff Mike Hennessey says those who still stayed were handled properly.
When given the order to disperse, the vast majority did disperse. The vast majority ran down the street and took off, did not want to get arrested, and were not arrested. But a group decided that they wanted to get arrested and sat down and waited to be arrested and very cooperative while being arrested.
But dozens of other protesters moved up and down Bryant Street to new intersections, performing street theater on the way. Police struck back, moving in the horses and motor scooters to clear the streets.
By about 8:30 this evening, police had pretty well cleared Bryant Street, successfully breaking up the protesters and dispersing them into small groups on street corners around the Hall of Justice.
But criticism of police use of undercover cops who marched and chanted right along with the rest of the protesters came from a legal observer.
They were looking like the demonstrators, they were acting like the demonstrators, they were encouraging demonstrators up to the point where they had the reinforcements and it became time to make arrests.
By tonight, police were loading the last of the protesters on buses to be hauled away and booked. In San Francisco, Dave Bryan, Channel 5 Eyewitness News Nightcast.
In spite of tonight's problems, it has been a very calm, peaceful week as hundreds of thousands demonstrated during the Democratic convention. Demonstrators moving through the financial district to protest the Democrats' ties to big business. When they started to block streets, the police moved in to break it up.